Hello again. I'll just reintroduce myself. My name's Ian Glover and I'm the president of CREST. I was asked to think about what a profession looks like in terms of information assurance, and these are my initial ideas in terms of doing a bit of research and looking at some of the activities that we're currently undertaking. Within CREST, it used to be called the Council of Registered Ethical Security Testers. Now our vision really is to represent the technical information assurance industry. So we used to do assessments of the professional qualifications for penetration testers. Our qualifications come in at around about 6,000 hours, in other words, about 2.5 years worth of experience, and at the higher levels around about 10,000 hours, 5 years worth of experience. Since we introduced those examinations, we've also now got security architecture exams that come in at around about 6,000 hours. We have host-based malware analysis, network-based malware analysis, reverse engineering, and also intrusion analysis. So again, 6,000 and 10,000 hour qualifications. They are really hard. I think that's the indication I would give. Even seasoned professionals that go in to take some of these exams really struggle, and we have around about, it depends which exam, around about a 50 to 60% pass rate. In addition to that, we also do company membership. In other words, what we do there is we audit the processes of the organisations to make sure they are taking appropriate steps to protect client-based information. That's the predominant reason for doing that type of work. And the important thing between those two is that we tie them together with codes of conduct. So we have a code of conduct that's signed by the individuals that say they will adhere to the policies, processes and procedures of the organisation that they work for, and then we have the companies sign their code of conduct as well to say that the policies, processes and procedures that they've provided to us for an audit, they are making sure that people actually apply them in practice. So in other words, they're made aware of them and they can implement them. And I'll come on to those codes in a minute in terms of describing what we do in other professions. The knowledge sharing quadrant over here is really things like this, CRESTx. We also do some guidance material and research, both with academia and with other organisations. I would have at this point waived a guide, but I've already handed them out because people quite like them. So we have them on things like penetration testing services, and we also have them on things like cybersecurity incident response. And then down the bottom here we have professional development, which is trying to encourage talent into the marketplace and then providing ongoing professional development activities. All of those things really, I think, go together to form this vision for the technical information security industry. What we're trying to do for our buying community is therefore provide the concept of a service, which is looking for a trusted company that's also got knowledgeable, skilled and competent individuals. And that's exactly what we want from a number of other professions. If we go into a hospital, what we want a trusted organisation to make sure everything is there, everything's serviced properly and everything is running and operational. And at the same time, we're making assumptions that the people working in that type of organisation are knowledgeable, skilled and competent. In other words, we're looking at all of those elements associated with how we're going to develop them as professionals. So the first thing is what is a professional? I can stand up here and I can say I've got 38 years experience in information technology. I've been specialising in professional services for around about the last 30 years. Therefore I'm old and therefore I'm a professional. I don't actually think that's very relevant, to be quite honest. In actual fact, I've got a degree in computer science, but I got that a very long time ago. I've got an HND in computer studies and programming. I'm absolutely not a programmer anymore. And so what does it actually mean? What is a professional? And these are some of the definitions. A person engaged or qualified in a profession, which isn't very helpful. However, professionals such as lawyers, medics and architects. So in other words, there is a body of knowledge there already in terms of what I believe are really good, organised, proper professions, grown-up professions. Then we've also got this other category of people engaged in a specific activity, especially sport, as their main paid preoccupation. So I know preoccupation or even occupation, rather than a pastime. So in other words, I'm a professional because I get paid for it. I don't think that is the right message that we should be getting over if we're going to try to do this as a proper profession, a proper grown-up thing that provides confidence to the buying community. So very much I'd like to concentrate on that first definition. So looking at those professions, then the traditional professions are doctors, engineers, lawyers, architects, commissioned military officers was the other one that often came up. And then in addition to that, we've then also got nurses, accountants, educators, scientists, technology experts, and I'll come on to that in a little while, and social workers. Now, some of those I would class as being proper professions. In other words, we can certainly categorise those up in the top, and others are, if you like, professional sports people. I've put this up because this is what happens as soon as you get a European directive or an ISO standard that looks at these things. Those practice on a basis of relevant professional qualifications in personal responsibility and professionally in independent capacity by those providing intellectual and conceptual services in the interests of the client and public. Now, if I've got to explain that's what I am in terms of being a professional, I'm going to really struggle with this. But there are some really interesting words in there. Words like professional, independent, conceptual service, and of interest to the client and the public are actually things that we can draw out, which I think are actually quite useful. If you then look at what the other professions do, this is the medical practitioner, and in some countries, including the UK, the profession's largely self-regulated, but it has got government accreditation to say they are acceptable, both from an individual perspective and from the organisations in which they work for. So in other words, there are trusted environments in which doctors and surgeons and other people in the medical fraternity can actually work. And I think the best example that I've looked at in quite a lot of detail is the General Medical Council. And in all the countries that I looked at, the regulating authorities have the right to revoke permission to practice. And that's really strong. That comes back to that code. So in other words, you can take away people's licence to operate. Now that's a very difficult thing to do in information technology currently, but I will explain in a little bit how we're gradually moving towards some of those concepts. If we then drop over to the law, again, all I try to do is to steal things from other people, so I have no original thought. Therefore, I look and try and interpret what other people are doing. So in the law, in a large number of countries, a law student must pass the bar examinations, or series of examinations to get through, before receiving a licence to practice. Now, within the information technology area, we do have examinations. We have things like CISSPs, we have things like some of the SANS qualifications. They're all really good. I think they are excellent. And I think packaged together, we can actually make something that's actually quite relevant to what we want to do. Individually, I don't think they quite portray this overall picture in terms of what we want in terms of being a professional. Some of the interesting thing about the bar is that they're actually very easy to hack, some of those qualifications. So if you ever want to do those online, please come and have a chat with us and we'll tell you how to download all of the information, all the questions. Not very difficult to pass in the States. However, even just ignoring that, you've still got 42% of people fail. So they should really take up computer science rather than going into the law. And some companies require a formal apprenticeship or with an experienced practitioner, standing next to somebody and working with them, which we've tried to do. And a lot of the professional bodies in this particular industry try that a lot. In other words, they try to work together and they try to mentor people. The problem with that is that generally we're in competition. So in other words, you have to try and mentor within your same organisation, which is quite a difficult thing to do. If we formalised it, we might be able to do something better. We then come to architect. Now, in terms of the qualifications I mentioned a little while ago, we've got security architect down there. Is that a profession yet? I'm not really sure. But the word architect is actually legally protected. So in other words, all we've done is we've stolen some of those things from a software architect or a security architect and used it for our own means, and we've run roughshod over everybody else's legally protected terms, which I think is, as an IT industry, is something we should do a lot more of. However, architects and architectures are used to describe other things as well. So we have to be very careful about some of these protected terms, and we have to make sure that if we're going to do something clever, then we should have some protected terms as well, and we should describe what those roles mean so you understand what a certified or a qualified person actually is and what it isn't, which is probably more important. Again, from the architectural perspective, only qualified people with an appropriate licence or certificate are allowed to do this work, and often they are governed by the government. In other words, the government has approved the qualification and the types of organisations they work for. This is now beginning to be a little bit of a common theme running through this in terms of what a profession really looks like. And we've got a licensure, which I think is a lovely word. I've never heard of it before until I looked it up. But that normally requires the accreditation of a university degree. So in other words, we've got this concept of moving from academia into a profession, and we recognise what a good degree in a particular area looks like, and we use that as a basis from which we then start professional development. We still haven't made a professional at that point, but we've provided an entry point for people to move into. So in other words, to practice architecture implies the ability to practice independently of supervision. And that's when you start to really become a professional. If you look at the qualifications that we run in terms of CREST for penetration testing, which are well recognised within the financial services and the government, at check team leader or our CREST certified level, that's where we start to get this independent of supervision type role, around about 10,000 hours, 5 years worth of experience. If you're doing this half time, it's going to take you 10 years to get that level of experience. And design professionals have a broader term. So in other words, there are other things that fit underneath an architect. I built my own house. I didn't do it. I haven't got very dirty hands. But the person I listened to the most was not the person that was doing the design for me. It was a structural engineer. If he said, this room's too big and you need a big metal bar going across the middle of it, I really listened to him. That was the person that I had most confidence in. It wasn't the architect, interestingly enough, because he just seemed to put mistakes and made the doors open the wrong way. But ignoring that, there are some specialisms in there in terms of you need to understand the basics and then you have to move things forward. So that architectural requirement is education, experience, examination. And the examination bit is really important. And again, you'll see that throughout all of the other professions that I've examined. And they do generally come in at 2,500 hours for somebody who's entering the industry, 6,000 hours for somebody who's becoming competent, and 10,000 hours in terms of somebody becoming an expert. After that, you then start to get some other interpretation in terms of being invited by the industry because of the contribution you make, but those are, if you like, the minimum standards. It applies to music, it applies to all sorts of other things as well. The educational requirements generally consist of a university degree in architecture. Now, from an IT perspective, I'd like us to be a broader church. I'd really like us to draw in higher apprenticeships. I'd really like us to be able to bring cross-training people in from different industries to pull us in to do this really exciting new things. And therefore, I don't really want to limit ourselves completely to this, but we need to have a common entry point, and we need to understand what a degree course is against other forms of qualifications or interest. The experience requirements for somebody who's already gone through the degree, and again this is degreed candidate, and again I'd never ever heard of this word until I did my research, but I will try and slip it into conversation to try to make itself sound like a true professional. And that's normally through an internship of 2 to 3 years depending on what they're actually doing. 2 to 3 years sounds very common to 6,000 hours-ish. So again, you're seeing a lot of these common numbers coming out in all of the disciplines. The registration examinations or series exams is required prior to actually becoming licensed. So in other words, you have to undertake a number of what I've classed as pathway qualifications to get up to this level, and then you can start to specialise into other things. So therefore, the formal study of architecture in the institution plays a pivotal role in the development of the profession as a whole, serving as a focal point for advances in architectural technology and theory. I think that's a fabulous statement, because you could just lift the architecture words out of those, and that's what we want us to do. We want to have a pivotal role in the opportunity we've got to actually develop this as being a profession. I thought I'd throw this one in. This is again from the architectural side. I'll come on to something called the CESG Certified Professional Scheme, which has 3 levels. These are the levels within an architectural firm. The interesting ones, I think, are the interns. I don't really like the word. I think that's a restricted word. Certainly if you speak to eSkills, it's a hard word to use, but that is a junior introductory type role. Architect Design 1, Architecture Design 2, Architecture Design 3, and then the senior security architects are definitely things we can see 6,000, 10,000 hours coming out of. In actual fact, their numbers are a little bit more. I just wonder whether or not they don't work very hard. So in other words, they have shorter weeks than us, and therefore it takes us longer to get there. And then after that, you then start to introduce other disciplines, project management skills, senior management partners, and in other words managing the firm, which is outside of what we're trying to do in terms of measuring to be a professional. So in other words, we've become a doctor at that point. Whether or not we want to become the administrator of the hospital, who knows? Who knows if we want to become head of practice? Those are different attributes and much more akin to the sort of Sophia level of influence and control. But you can see here, again, there's a lot of commonality in terms of what we're trying to do. So then you'd start to look at the concept of a professional association or body, because these people work within these organisations. And they're normally not for profit. I much prefer the concept of not for loss. I work for a not-for-profit organisation. If we make no money at all, then we can't reinvest in doing things better. We can't invest in things like CRESTx and doing other exciting things. So therefore, you've got to try and generate funds. But the interesting thing there is it's the interest of the individual engaged in that profession you're trying to protect and a public interest. Well, that's really very similar to what we're trying to do in terms of information technology and information assurance. We want to make sure that we're protecting and giving a pathway for people to actually get into the career and move forward. And at the same time, we're trying to make sure the public is protected from charlatans who don't really know what they're doing. So we have some other nice learned occupations, and we have a body acting to safeguard public interest. I think are nice, broad, old terms that we can actually adopt if we want to make ourselves look old as a profession. So this is all really interesting, but so what? You know, I've come here with an academic type paper discussing other things that don't relate to what we do. So what does that relate to in terms of what we're doing here? I really think the IA industry is being viewed as a profession. It must demonstrate certain attributes. If we want to be viewed as being a grown-up professional institution, we want to be viewed as being something that somebody would like to join and have a career that goes through. I've had a fantastic time in all the years I've been doing this, and really I want to portray that over to other people and provide that opportunity for others. But if we're going to attract the very best youth, we've got to compete against other people with more defined career paths. The hard engineering companies right now see the demographic change in the UK, and they're investing huge funds to make sure they're going to get the very best people. As an IT industry, we're not doing that, and as an IA industry, we're certainly not coordinated to do a very good job right now. Yet, we have what I think is one of the most interesting subject areas, one of the most relevant subject areas, one of the most modern and forward-thinking subject areas, and we need to portray that in a way that's really interesting to people. And if the buying community can have any confidence in what we do, they've got to understand exactly what it is. We have to work within the law, some of the other presentations earlier on. We have to be competent at what we do. We have to be able to have a process for dealing with problems associated with things that go wrong within the industry, either as an individual or at a corporate level. And we need to make sure that that's communicated to the buying community in a structured way. So for individuals, we need a skills framework. We need accredited university courses. We need an entry point for training from university and other sources that say, welcome to this industry. You've demonstrated you're interested in it by getting a degree or doing some training or having some demonstrability through your CRESTxLancaster research you've done yourself or your SANS course. And now we're going to embrace you into our industry and give you a career path. We need to make that career path hard, I think. Everything I've ever done in my life that's been worthwhile has been difficult to achieve. And I think we should do that because we want to make this something as terms of an aspirational thing that people get to. Certainly some of the CREST qualifications right now in penetration testing in particular are aspirational qualifications that people entering the information security arena want to get to. We want to make it worthwhile, relevant to the industry. So in other words, we can get you a job if you get these types of qualifications. And we need to be able to reflect the status in the industry. So in other words, it has to mean something. I've mentioned CISSP a few times. I like it. I really like it as a qualification. Probably 120 hours. You can read the book, you can do some research. With a little bit of background, you can go and do the multiple choice questions and you can answer it. And then you can put CISSP after your name. Is that hard? I don't think it is. Is it worthwhile? Yeah, it is, because it demonstrates I've got some interest in it. But as a professional, I don't want that person who's read the book to be operating on my eyes. Is it relevant to the industry? Well, it is, because it's the only thing on the street almost at the moment. But is it absolutely relevant to the industry? Does it give us the people we want? I'm not sure that it does. Part of an overall package, I think absolutely. And if we can put that together, that would be a really clever thing. We need to be able to revoke people's licenses, and I'll come back onto this in a minute. If somebody gets thrown out of, I'm going to get followed by somebody from the IET, I could easily be followed by the BCS or the ISSP. If we throw them out of those institutions, they can go and join another one. And does it really affect their career? Don't know. If you throw a medical person or an architect out, they will not work in the industry in the UK. Therefore, the codes of conduct associated with the individuals and companies are really important. We need the ability to revoke somebody's license to work if we want to be a profession. We shouldn't just use that arbitrarily, but we should have that ultimate sanction to stop people working in the industry. The ongoing professional development, therefore, is really important. This is my personal view, and you can shoot holes in this, please. The only reason I've left this in was because it took me a long time to make the slide. So that's the only reason. So we've got a skills framework down the bottom here. ISSP skills framework, I think, is really good. It's been recognised by the industry, is used by the CCP, the CSG Certified Professional Scheme. The accredited university courses, I think some of those are actually starting to come into place. I know, again, the IET, the BCS and CSG are working together to try to look at university courses to put some accreditation in there. Accredited development, again, eSkills and other people are doing work in those areas to look at how we accredit the development of the individual. Pathways through the professions is new, and again, eSkills, I think, is doing some really interesting work in that. We've got to work collaboratively to make it work. Professional qualifications, I've put CREST quite high up on there, as opposed to the general industry. So this is my little bit as opposed to a big metamorphosis of different organisations. But what we're looking for there is professional qualifications at 2,500 hours, 6,000 hours, 10,000 hours. I don't think we got the 2,500 hour one right at all, which was the first one. Industry recognition for seniors, I think the traditional institutions do that really well. You can become a fellow of something, and it is meaningful. Does mean something in terms of your stature in the marketplace. Professional development, we've got to do a whole heap of work, I think, to actually put in pathways for people to understand how they get from an entry point to an area of specialism and professionalisation. Codes of conduct, I'll come on to this in terms of CREST. CREST is interesting because you can't really work in the UK financial services industry as a penetration tester without being a CREST organisation and employ CREST qualified people. In addition to that, we provide the qualifications, generally the vast majority of the qualifications for the CSG check scheme, the government penetration testing scheme. And I do investigations. I've done 8 investigations over the last 5 months. That isn't to say there's lots of problems. It's just interesting that we've now got a mechanism for dealing with them, I think. My ultimate sanction is I will throw a company out of the CREST scheme. So in other words, I will say, I will take your accreditation away. They will not then work in the financial services in the UK very easily at all. I could also then push that down to the individual, and again, I'll take away their licence to work. I'll take away their qualification. If they're signed up to do the work within the UK government, I have a back-to-back contract with the government, and I let the government know that I've thrown that individual out. I would also let them know, again, if it's a Czech company, that I've thrown that organisation out. I have no sanction in terms of what they would do. I think if it was serious enough for me to throw them out, I think they would throw them out as well. So in other words, in one fell swoop, I would stop them working in the financial services and government industry within the UK. That's a pretty big stick, and I never ever want to use it. I want to improve people's policies, procedures, and make sure people operate in a professional way. But I have got that sanction, that licence to revoke, to take that away, and we haven't got that in a number of other areas. So, the narrative behind that. The ISSP skills framework is really good. I think it can be extended in little areas. I think there's all sorts of things, but generally the interpretation has been put together as a body of knowledge, and I think it's good. The eSkills pathway projects are really good, I think. Very early days, but the analysis they're doing in terms of identifying how you get into a discipline, how you move forward is really interesting. And there's lots of initiatives in terms of defining the entry point. This is the Lancaster CREST first cut view of how many hours roughly against the ISSP skills framework you would need, and then we'd start to populate that with some of the pathway qualifications. This is the route through to try to get to 2,500 hours. And it can be a range of qualifications, it can be a range of equivalents, it can be a range of different things, but roughly broken down into course module lengths. I think it's really interesting, and I think I'd share this with anybody else who's really interested in this area so we can compare and contrast notes and come out with a collaborative view. And again, that's just an example of the pathway. CSG Certified Professional Scheme is really interesting. At the moment there is 3 levels. There's a general practitioner, and then there's a senior, and then there's a lead. I think the middle section is too broad. because the lead is so high. The lead is somebody who actually influences the industry for the future. Really very difficult to get to. So I think we need to have a 10,000, 6,000 hour type qualifications in those areas. I also think the general practitioner level is a bit too easy to get in because it doesn't cover all of the ground. These are just my opinions. I think it's a really good scheme. I'm really supportive of it, and I really like the fact that the UK government has taken an initiative driven by organisations outside and then worked with certain certification bodies to move the whole thing forward. Sounds very much like we're heading towards a profession. The training course assessment by, the university course has been accredited by the IET, the BCS and ISSP, and a little bit of CREST, I think is the right initiative. I don't know how we're going to do it yet. I think it's very difficult because of the generalised nature in what we do. However, if you look at the ISSP skills framework, I think that a penetration tester should understand a bit about 27001, legal and regulatory compliance. It should understand bits more about awareness, policies, and all of those risk assessments at a general level, and then start to specialise. So I think we can do it. We just need to use the existing frameworks. Training course assessments are coming through by eSkills, and they're going to be linked to the skills analysis and the eSkills pathway project. And then you've got these codes of conduct, and again I've said the CREST one is meaningful, I think class as well, even though they haven't got, which is the CSG listed security advisor scheme, even though they haven't got a proper code of conduct, the theory is they can take away somebody's licence to work within the UK government in certain areas in IT. That's the only other scheme I've seen like that. And removal of membership is not meaningful in terms of some of the other professional bodies. I'm not criticising the professional bodies, it's just not meaningful in terms of actually stopping people or revoking their licence to work. These are the regulatory bodies, and there's lots. But who would you join? Why would you join? The professional bodies under the CCP schemes are listed there, the ISSP, BCS and APMG Group Limited. That's a limited company, that's not one of these not-for-profits, so that's quite an odd one. And then we've got things like our SARCA and all sorts of other things that you may wish to join. Mostly self-regulating, and the government has done some affirming authority through the CCP scheme and some of the other CSG schemes as well, things like CHECK. And the ability to revoke permissions in practices of malpractice and serious misconduct is there, but we need to work together. So in summary, I think it's essential that we become a profession. I really do. I've been doing this a very long time. We have a fantastic opportunity right now to make a difference. If we don't take that opportunity, it's going to be another 20 years, and I'm not going to be around. We're moving in the right direction. I think there's a lot of really good initiatives by industry, government and suppliers to do things, and we're definitely doing the right things. We need to be able to recognise the contribution of existing experts. So in other words, I had something on secure computing the other day that talked about the concept of 2,500 hours. And the amount of abuse I got was quite incredible from people saying, I've got 20 years worth of experience, why on earth should I need to take qualifications? Well, I'm not asking you to. You've got 20 years worth of experience, you're established in the industry, you're recognised, you do what you do. Is that any reason to change what's going to happen behind us and try to make it more professional? I don't think it is. There needs to be clarity on the professional membership to the industry bodies. If I'm interested in doing this, what should I join? And is it equivalent? I don't know, honestly, what I would join right now if I was coming out of university. I would probably join the BCS because they come on most of the milk rounds, they come and talk to people more. The IET are extremely good at doing this sort of stuff in terms of the more hard engineering side. I don't think quite they've got their act together in terms of information technology. CREST doesn't do it. The ISSP is doing it through its academic partner program. But we're almost competing for the same people. That doesn't make sense, in my mind. Government has a leading role, and I think is working very hard. A lot of the initiatives coming out of the Cabinet Office, CSG, Security Services and others, I think are the right things. But the industry regulators should be involved more. People like the Bank of England, the FSA, and some of the other people that actually do controls in these areas should be really interested in what we're trying to do in terms of a profession. And the professional bodies in the UK should be encouraged to work collaboratively. We do work collaboratively. We should be encouraged to work more collaboratively. Because we all have good things to offer. We do compete in certain areas, and there is a nervousness, I think, about losing certain market position, particularly for some of our board members. But that's not a reason for us not to get our act together. Therefore, we need to also influence international initiatives, and we can only do that if we've got our own house in order in the UK first. And then finally, I think we need to publicise an industry plan. We need to get the industry bodies together, some of the academics together, some of the industry and government influencers together in a room and come out with a plan about how we're going to professionalise this industry. Then everybody understands the little component parts they work on and then how we can all make a difference, rather than replicating things and adding more confusion. Thank you very much.